Hello, BookTube. As you may know, I have a guest here for the next few days. David Murphy, former BookTuber David Murphy, is here for a visit. And naturally, we met at the Brattle. We met at the Brattle Bookshop as soon as his plane got in. He came straight to the Brattle Bookshop because where else am I going to meet my guests? And we had a wonderful time browsing around, shopping. There's really nothing quite like the Brattle. And the Brattle also has a sale lot outside with thousands more books for $1, $3, or $5. So there's plenty to look at. And David's visit is wonderful, but it is going to have an impact on my video making. I mean, I'm not going to go into another room and make 2 hours of videos when I've got a guest sitting there in the other room waiting. So, but nevertheless, he's gone out exploring, and I wanted to make a video and show you the pile of books that I got at the Brattle. But the first one that I want to start with doesn't come from the Brattle. It comes from a little free library. The Bean and I were walking by a little free library, and the little free library very much wanted me to reconsider a lifelong problem that I've had with literary figure. I love canonical works. I absolutely dote on them, and yet I have never got along with Charles Dickens. I've tried many times, and it just hasn't worked. And I keep trying, and I'm going to keep trying. I always say on this channel, some authors, I keep trying with them until I reach a point where I think, no, this is just, there's nothing here. And other authors, I read them and I keep trying because I think there's got to be something here. I'm not seeing it, but 80 million Frenchmen can't be wrong. There's no way that this could be empty. And Dickens is the mother of all authors like that. He's the prime example. So I'm going to keep trying. And sooner or later, maybe something will cause the penny to drop, and then I will get him. I will get why he is so fervently beloved. And in this little free library, there was a perfect copy, perfect condition, like the day it was made, of David Copperfield in these old Bantam paperbacks, these white spine Bantam paperbacks that I love so much. I have this very edition of David Copperfield uh, on a shelf for classics, but the copy that I found was in really, really bad shape. I reinforced it, and that only seemed to make things worse. Whereas this can be read without reinforcement. This is a brand new paperback, even though it's 40 years old. Um, and if the fates are going to keep putting Dickens in front of me, I'm going to give him a try. I will try David Copperfield again. David Copperfield is one of the most popular Dickens novels. I've read it many times, and I just don't see why it's popular. I don't see what is charming about this at all. It all seems very hammy. Maybe I need to embrace the ham. We shall see. I also got paperback nonfiction. This is William Hoffer's book Saved, about the Lusitania. Or no, not the Lusitania, the Andrea Doria, which collided with another vessel and sank off the coast of Nantucket. It's which is an island off the coast of Massachusetts that I know really, really well. And this was a lively part of Nantucket history at the time. I don't think I have ever read this book. I've read a lot of stuff on the Andrea Doria, but I don't think I've ever read this one. I wouldn't be surprised if this only came out as a mass market paperback in America. Once upon a time, you could find mass market paperbacks with the original cover art on serious nonfiction subjects. You can't do that anymore, but once upon a time you could. Then we have an author I just read mystery by this author just recently, and I really, really enjoyed it. And it was a type of enjoyment that I know will carry over to other books. I know that it will. So the author is Edmund Crispin, and this is probably his most famous mystery, The Moving Toy Shop. I read Buried for Pleasure, and I really liked it. It was really, really knowing, really high quality prose, which you don't always get even in these older mysteries. I can't say so much about the actual mystery in the story. I think that might be, oddly enough, Edmund Crispin's weak spot, is constructing an actual mystery. There really wasn't much of one in Buried for Pleasure, and I don't know that. I think I read this book out from a library like 50 years ago. Imagine that, like many mystery readers, I will be a few pages in, and then I will remember whether or not, if it all starts to sound familiar, then I'll remember that I read it. Then this is, I believe, a double. I'm going to have to check. I'm going to have to dig deep in my... I have a whole wall of books and about reading and occasional pieces like that. And I'm pretty sure I already have this, although I don't think it's in this kind of condition. This is the private papers of a bankrupt bookseller, which it doesn't have a dust jacket, and it's a little bit battered. It was $1, so I'm perfectly happy. And it's on all sorts of bookish subjects. Let's look here. Trade books, books no decent bookseller would keep, books on travel and guidebooks, books, bookbinding and businessmen, blue books, business books, books about food and drink. Occasional pieces that are very much along the lines of what I do, for instance, every week in my column, and that countless other people have done in columns and occasional pieces like that. I love them, absolutely love them. And this is Sir William Young. There's no author on here, but the author was Sir William Young, who was, I believe, a politician. But these were occasional bookish memoirs. I'm pretty sure I already have a copy of this, but I will double check. When you're browsing out in the Brattle sale lot and you see something for $1 or $3 and you're not 100% sure that you already have it, my approach is usually to grab it. If it ends up being a double, I can get rid of it. But if it isn't, and I haven't grabbed it, I'm going to kick myself, and it won't be there. When I go back the next time, it won't be there. And we're going to see another example of that. Like, for instance, there's this thing. This is a penguin of the selected prose of Matthew Arnold. Totally a little sun-faded like that. And again, I saw this thing and was not sure that if I have a copy behind me here or somewhere else. I'm not really sure. A lot of this will be literary, and I love Arnold's prose, but I had to grab it. And then this next one was the Fates. Sometimes the Fates are watching when you're at the Brattle or thinking about the Brattle. Just the other day, I was talking about, what was it? It was a fantasy story that I read for fabulously failed February fantasy stories. A Robert E. Howard story, The Witch of Hell's Kitchen. And it reminded me, the premise of the story reminded me of a Conan the Barbarian comic book from 50 years ago. I went and found that comic book, and sure enough, it was too identical, down point by point, to possibly be a coincidence. But the story attributed by Roy Thomas, the writer of the comic, was not called The Witch of Hell's Kitchen. And that made me wonder about, what title did it originally have when it appeared. None of you have been putting forward some hypotheses about that. I really enjoy the thinking about the subject. I haven't gone to research it myself. And during that video, when I was talking about that, I said, gee, isn't it a shame that there isn't, in the popular press, a big, fat, critical biography of Robert E. Howard? I don't think I've ever seen one. There ought to be one. There ought to be many of them. I know writer biographies are a bit of a stretch to pitch to a publisher, but the writer of Conan, I think that would be easy to do. I'm pretty sure that would be easy to do. I'm just amazed that I haven't seen lots of these things. Maybe they've been out there in smaller presses and I've just missed them. But I was thinking a big critical biography, like the one that Michael K. Vaughan is reading of Edgar Rice Burroughs. I was thinking a big critical biography of that would lay to rest any questions about this. I would go to that biography, go to its index, and find out the story behind The Witch of Hell's Kitchen. But then I just let it go, and then I was at the Brattle, and I found this. This is Two Gun Bob, a centennial study of Robert E. Howard. So this is not quite what I was looking for, but it has lots and lots of critical essays on Robert E. Howard. There is not, I checked, and there is not like a catalog or a definitive list here that I can tell, unless it's buried in one of these pieces. But the pieces sound fantastic. There's Words from the Outer Dark, which is about the poetry of Robert E. Howard. There's a whole essay on Bran McMorn. There's a whole essay on El Barak. It's just all sorts of stuff in here. And an ominous bookmark telling you all about the black bear, the Louisiana black bear. What do we learn about it? It's a shrinking population, now estimated at between 100 and 200 individuals. But this bookmark probably was made years ago. That number, I believe, has gone up. Those of you who are in Louisiana can tell me different, but I think that number has gone up. I think black bears in Louisiana are doing quite well. Conservation is working. Threats are listed as habitat loss due to logging, agriculture and development, roadkills, and poaching. Oh, so not a list of the threats that black bears pose, which they do. They're not nearly as big as grizzly bears, and they look different. The grizzly bear face does not look like that. Black bears have a much more uniformly conical face, whereas the grizzly bear has that famous dent, that famous forehead that makes them look so terrifying. But black bears can still get pretty big, and sometimes they can be pretty bad-tempered. They are responsible for killing humans, definitely. But anyway, the bookmark is not the point. The point is that this felt like the touch of destiny. I now have at least partially a critical work on Robert E. Howard, and maybe that's priming the pump. Maybe maybe this book actually made it to the Brattle as part of a larger collection. Maybe someone had a whole bunch of books on Robert E. Howard, including critical studies of his work and retitling and his critical heritage, and maybe a biography or two. That would be great. That would be great. Edgar Rice Burroughs has had a couple of biographies. Arthur Conan Doyle has had a few biographies. Edgar Rice Burroughs created Tarzan. Arthur Conan Doyle created Sherlock Holmes. Well, Robert E. Howard created Conan. That's a very small, select group. If you have created an immortal character, you don't have much literary company. But anyway, anyway, then we have a trade paperback. This is military history. I am a big fan of military history. I've never read this book. This is by Stephen Turnbull, and it's The Art of Renaissance Warfare. Little bit wobbly in terms of the shape that it's in, but still perfectly fine, perfectly readable. It will either be really good or it will be really boring. On military history like this is going to take you on a tour of almost 1,000 years of European history. So I'll know pretty early on if this is just going to be a slog. I'd really rather not it be a slog, but it was $1, so I'm not out much if it turns out to be a boring trudge through Renaissance warfare. Renaissance warfare is fascinating. The subject matter is fascinating. The traumatic, uneven shift from a way of warfare that have been settled for centuries to the modern world, to the new world that we think of. It's fascinating in that way, and there are all sorts of big, larger-than-life characters in there, so we will see what this provides. This is a book that's edited by Sybil Steinberg. I love these sorts of things anyway. I get them anyway. I go right through them like candy, and I typically don't keep them. Every once in a while, I will glean some interesting bits and pieces from them. This is Writing for Your Life #2, a collection of self-aggrandizing, self-serving interviews with authors about writing and their life as a writer and whatnot. So, how many pieces are in here? I guess there was a Writing for Your Life 1 that I don't have. Yeah, there are about 3 dozen pieces in here, maybe a little more than that. So it'll be 3 dozen different ways of an author saying, well, actually, I think I was born to write. But there'll be bits and pieces. There'll be interesting observations and insights about the writing life in there. I'm sure there will be. I always glean at least a few really, really good keepers from anthologies like that. So then these next two, another example of when you encounter something at the Brattle, either in the sale lot or in the shop, and you're not sure. If I encounter something and I'm not sure, I'm thinking, okay, do I have these or don't I? The solutions, especially since everything is so cheap, the solution is just to get them. For me, the solution is just to get them. Because if I'm wrong and I don't have this thing, then it's going to be bothering me for days until I can get back to the shop. And when I do, it will be gone. Better to be safe than sorry. If I already do have it as a double, I can always get rid of it. And this is 2 books, and I wasn't sure. I wasn't positive, so I grabbed them both. These are the 2 volumes of the memoir of Anthony Burgess. This is Little Wilson and Big God, and You've Had Your Time. So these 2 volumes with dust jackets, just fine condition. And I saw them both at the shop at the same time. I love these 2 books. To Distraction. I think they're incredible. Among the best things that this incredibly prolific author ever wrote. Full of tossed off comedy and great personality portraits and a million other things like that. Just, I was telling David Murphy, it will spoil you for memoirs. It really will. You will read this memoir and think, and then read some, flyweight memoir that came out in 2022, and you'll think, oh my God, this is in a class with Goodbye to All That by Robert Graves. So I was happy to find them. We got back here, and I checked my shelf, and I do not have a copy of You've Had Your Time at all. And I did have another hardcover copy of Little Wilson and Big God. And the getting rid of it was not hard at all. I simply handed it to David Murphy, who doesn't have a copy. He's going to love it. So that was easy. So now I have these 2. That's great. So that was a good gamble. And then this next one is a BookTube made me do it. I would have grabbed it anyway. I've had this before. I'm pretty sure I got it from the publisher. But it went away, as so many things do. This is a big, fat anthology, the best American mystery stories of the 19th century. And the reason I would have got it anyway is because it's edited by Otto Penzler, who cannot go wrong. You cannot go wrong. If you see this edited by Otto Penzler, you cannot go wrong with the book that is on. And this is going to have a whole bunch of figures that I know, but also, I'm sure, a whole bunch of figures that I don't. I don't remember that I ever read this. So maybe I never got it from a publisher. Let's see when it came out. 2014. Okay, so I wasn't talking with you in 2014, but I was very much back in the reviewing game. I could have got this from a publisher, and maybe I'm just not remembering it, or maybe I didn't. Who is the publisher? Houghton Mifflin. Well, I found it for $3 at the Brattle, so I grabbed it because this is, after all, March Mystery Madness, and an anthology like this last year for March Mystery Madness really led me down a whole bunch of really good rabbit holes. I learned a lot about a lot of authors that I have since followed up on, which, as we've said on this channel many times, is one of the main virtues of a great anthology, is that it shows you that somebody's out there, and then you can go and find them. You can go and find more of them. I imagine that happens. I just watched a video today by Olive at a Book Olive where she mentions that phenomenon happens to her. I'm sure it's happened to a lot of you. I'm hoping that it will happen for me with this book for March Mystery Madness. Other than this next book, also $1, also from the sale lot, and part of a trend that has been happening for years here in my little book room. This is my little sanctum sanctorum, where all kinds of books are on these shelves. I had the rare luxury of having this room completely empty. Not the shelves empty, but the room empty. Just an empty, bare-walled room. So that I had the enormous luxury of being able to build in the books and the bookcases exactly the way I wanted them, instead of, moving things around and, oh, that's enough for today and let's quit and whatnot. I was able to do it. I even took a picture of the walls here with the bookcases on them when they had no books on them. And then I moved the books into this room, and I thought I was going by instinct, and largely I can tell when I'm going through my books or when I'm looking at books elsewhere out in the wild. I can usually tell what's coming into this room. But gradually over time, the canonical classics in this room have been growing. There's the Penguin classics, but those are sort of, I love Penguin classics, but with a lot of the classics here that I really love, they're not the only version that I want. I want something better. Like there's about 4 volumes of Penguin Classic of Sherlock Holmes, but you've got that leather Sherlock Holmes right up there. There's a couple of volumes of Penguin Classic Mark Twain travel writing, but I've got that anthology that I really like. There's a Penguin Classic of the Jungle Books, but I really like that Falls River hardcover, and so on and so forth. They're all over this room now, and I'm just embracing that. So if I find a classic, an edition of a classic out in the wild, and I like the look of it, I'm not going to think, well, I have a Penguin Classic of that, so I don't need it. And that's what happened with this next book. I found a beautiful illustrated copy of Moll Flanders, which I haven't reread in 10 years. This is a fantastic, funny, biting book. And it's got illustrations all throughout, including this rather seductive thing right at the beginning, right with the frontispiece. That's fantastic. Somebody put a dust jacket cover over this, so this is yet another classic that is coming into this room. Something's going to have to go out, but I'm finding lots of doubles in my temporarily stalled library tour. I'm finding lots of doubles, so making the room won't be hard. The thing that's bothering me is not making the room, it's that they all ought to be together. I ought to be able to see the progress. I just recently got this, for instance, Tom Jones, in this edition, which I really like. And it's just sitting there transwise on a shelf because I need to do some book rearranging as soon as I'm finished with my library tour for this room. So the beginning of summer, probably. I'm going to rearrange a lot of the books in this room, pull out all the dead weight, free up a lot of space, move things around, and maybe fill a whole bookcase with canonical stuff like this. But anyway, let's move on to the last book, which is another anthology. This is not murder mysteries, but rather science fiction. Science fiction / fantasy. It's this. It's Tales from Beyond. It's Unknown World, Tales from Beyond. Big anthology. Again, somebody put a library covering on it. And it's a collection of classic science fiction and fantasy short stories from the annals of Unknown Worlds magazine, which I guess was only around for a handful of years during World War II, and was at one point called Unknown. It's had both names, Unknown and Unknown Worlds. I'm assuming that really good condition original issues of Unknown or Unknown Worlds are probably pretty expensive, pretty collectible. Not a world that I know anything about, but I'm only glancingly familiar with the magazine, so I'm not. I mainly came to this thing for the table of contents. Who do we have here? Robert Bloch, L. Sprague de Camp, Henry Kuttner, Fritz Leiber, Manly Wade Wellman, Lester Del Rey, Theodore Sturgeon, C.L. Moore, L. Sprague de Camp again, Fritz Leiber again, Frederick Brown, Henry Kuttner again, Lester Del Rey again, Frank Belknap Long. Just encountered him in that fantasy anthology that I talked about. Theodore Sturgeon again, A.E. Van Vogt, Jack Williamson. Great. Fantastic. Lots of stories in here, too. And the forward, the brief, there's like a 2-paragraph forward here, and it makes the magazine itself sound rather interesting. I think it was a John Campbell magazine, but I don't know much about it. I'm mainly coming to this anthology for the contents rather than for, yield and times, reminding me of a magazine that I don't think I've ever even seen a copy. I don't think I've ever seen an issue of that short run of that magazine. But anthologies are always great. I know most of the names in here, but maybe one of the stories in here will be by a name I don't particularly like. Henry Kuttner is a great example. Maybe a story in here turns that opinion. Maybe I read a story by him that's really great and think, okay, well, if he can do that, maybe I should read more of him. Just recently had a version of that kind of renewed interest in the science fiction writer John Brunner. Luckily, I found a whole bunch of his stuff, and reading through it made me think that same way, except that Brunner I really like. But we shall see. So there you go. That was a Brattle haul with a guest. We have Unknown Worlds. We have Maul Flanders. We have an Otto Penzler anthology of the best 19th century American mystery stories. We have Anthony Burgess, the 2 volumes of Anthony Burgess's memoir. We have Writing for Your Life, #2. We have a Renaissance Warfare, a book on Renaissance Warfare, a dismayingly thin thing. We have Two Gun Bob. A lot of the pieces in here I'm going to read right away. We have selected prose of Matthew Arnold. We have what is probably a double, the private papers of a bankrupt bookseller. You're losing me here. Here, let's just put this aside. Before it collapses, let's put it aside. Let's not ask for trouble. Then we have The Moving Toy Shop in a little green spine penguin crime. I always have good luck with books that look like this. I always do. We have Saved, Encounter, a book about the Leandro Doria. And from Little Free Library, we have David Copperfield. Will this be the year that finally does it for me and Charles Dickens? I don't know. I will report back. But anyway, lots and lots of good stuff. I don't know what kind of video making schedule I'm going to be able to upkeep in the next few days. And I also don't know, the number one question I've been getting in emails here is what videos I'm going to make with David. He's out and about exploring Boston. I don't know what mood he's in for making videos. Not everybody wants to be on a video, If he wanted to be on videos, his channel would probably still be up. I'll have to check with him and see. There must be something that we can do, maybe a tag, an interesting tag or something that he hasn't done. I'll try. I'll try my best. And I will, you'll see the results. I mean, he'll be back. We have plenty of time, plenty of days left. So I will do my best to get him in front of the camera, because I know that a lot of you liked his channel and miss it. But anyway, I'm going to wrap this up for now, but I'll be back. Thank you, BookTube.